Hello everyone, welcome back. It's me, Onyx Harlow here, and today we're going to be looking at a brand new series on this YouTube channel, brand new mapping series that is. This is going to be titled Warped Worlds. Now, let's introduce ourselves to this world really quickly, but first I actually do want to talk about one more thing, is I have a PNG tuber now you can see at the corner of the screen. This is mostly going to be prioritized for non-mapping content, so let me know in the comments if you want this little gremlin to stay on the corner of the screen, because I know it's going to block up some stuff, like right now it's covering all of Oceania. But, yeah, without further ado, let's introduce ourselves to the world. And, obviously, there are a lot of things about it that are, pretty strange, so let's start looking at this. And I do also want to say before we jump into it that I'm going to start editing these videos because I have high expectations for them, and I don't want them to do as the Wixo videos did. I want this to be an actual thing that I can have fun doing because they're actually performing well. Anyways, that's enough yapping from me. Let's jump right on into this scenario video. Starting off over here in North America, let's introduce ourselves to some of the countries here. Starting off, we have the Canadian countries, and I'm realizing now that I forgot to give Newfoundland and Labrador a capital, so let's go ahead and fix that. And there we go, much better. But that's our first country, and we also see that Quebec is independent from Canada as well, but the main Canadian state still exists. Though, however, this region of Canada, British Columbia, as well as Idaho, Washington, and Oregon have broken away from their original states and formed Cascadia. Now's the point where I tell you that most countries are from different realities in their worlds. For example, California down here was in a scenario where America had basically ruled most of North America, and the state of California had expanded itself all the way down through Baja California, and then that thing fell apart, so they just got away with expanding into Baja California. And in our timeline, likely we would have seen them take other states like Nevada, but due to them being kind of more separate in this reality, California isn't able to take those away. Though I will say we do have a disputed layer, and we do see that California claims both Arizona and Nevada, and also over here, Texas claims all of Oklahoma. We'll see more disputes later on, but for now, that's all we're going to be looking at. From here, we look to the southern United States, where we see a reality where the Confederate States of America won the American Civil War and successfully gained their independence. And from here, this thing kind of spiraled out of control because Florida and Texas both wanted too much control, so they were essentially kicked out of the Union. Texas was so controlling that they basically kind of started mini wars against America. The Confederate States didn't like that, so they booted them out. That's also why they claim all of Oklahoma. And Florida, on the other hand, we'll have you create the lore for that because I don't know why Florida is Florida. From here, we move down to the Caribbean, where not much has changed, and we see that these three countries over here are perfectly normal. But from there, we have all these guys united into one country. Simply to put it, it's much easier to do that than have all these guys independent. They took Dominica's capital as well, so if you're wondering which country's capital that is, it's Roseau in Dominica. From here, we see that Hispaniola has united into one country, and from here, we see that Puerto Rico has also gained its independence from the US. From here, you also will notice one thing about North America, and that is Alaska. Now, why is Alaska pink, but they don't have a capital? Well, there's only one country who would own this other than America. Let's be real here. We all know who it is. If you guessed the great and mighty Liechtenstein, you would be correct. And this is our perfect transition to talk about Europe. If you're wondering about South America or any of the other continents, we'll talk about those in another episode. But for now, we're kind of on limited time because there are a few events I want to get done in this video, so we can't talk about it forever. Starting off in the British Isles, we see that Ireland has split into two, and Northern Ireland has kind of assimilated with the rest of Ireland, but due to some divide that happened along the time since then, we see this island country being split into two. From here, we also see that Scotland has achieved its independence from the rest of the United Kingdom, which is likely just now called England, even though Wales is still a part of it. That's for you guys to really figure out, though. From here, though, we see another giant country, and this is Sweden. This is a Viking empire that somehow managed to make it to modern day, and their empire is pretty vast. They control all of Ellesmere Island up here in Canada, all of Greenland, all of Iceland, Svalbard, almost all of Norway except for this little bit that Finland has, and they also have the Estonian islands here. The only thing that they're really missing is actual Swedish land, which is controlled by Denmark, who is kind of a breakaway of this thing. It's just that they hated each other so much that Denmark actually managed to gain independence, but Sweden isn't weak. They have control over basically everything else. From here, let's head on over to Iberia, where Spain is not really doing too good. The central country in the center is Spain, and Portugal is pretty much intact, but they lost control of Catalonia, Valencia, Andalusia, and Galicia, as well as the Basque region, which expanded into France as well. We'll talk more about that in another video, though, because this region is going to have some pretty interesting stuff going on within it. From here, we also see that France kind of fell apart. This France is from a reality where, after the Napoleonic Wars, they were really punished. Brittany was controlled by Britain at one point entirely, but due to this England being from a different reality, we see that this Brittany kind of just was free to operate itself, so they're going to operate themselves. From here, this region was controlled by Italy, but since this reality was formed, this country has declared independence from the northern Italian country, which declared its independence from the main Italian country. That's a lot, I know. Same for Corsica, though. Corsica also gained its independence from this northern guy, who gained its independence from this guy. Let's head on over to the Netherlands, which, as you can see, has taken a bit of Belgium. They've also taken a bit of Germany, and they've lost a bit of their own country. This is because of the Lower Germany, which we're going to talk about in a second. But sliding right down on to Luxembourg here. Luxembourg is from a very strange timeline. In their timeline, the Holy Roman Empire kind of just died, and Luxembourg kind of just took control over as many states as they could. However, Luxembourg eventually fell apart due to the same reasons. However, they did keep a large control over this part of Belgium because Belgium was probably the worst part of the Holy Roman Empire. And now Luxembourg's worst enemy, which is the Holy Roman Empire. This is not Germany. This is the HRE. And it's somehow in the somewhat modern day. I don't know what year this would possibly be, but every single country here has made it to the same time, at least. So they all have the same technology. But this Holy Roman Empire state somehow managed to unite and is somehow alive. Don't ask me how. I just wanted to include it in some way. And they probably claimed some of these guys, but I didn't really get to that on the disputes map. But as for now, we're just going to focus on you, Hungary, because I was going to come to you next for the disputes, because this Hungary is from a timeline where Hungary revolted from Austria-Hungary when the Archduke was killed in 1914, and they got away with a lot more land by the end of World War I. This is the same timeline as the Slovakia here, though because of the existence of a Bohemian state here, they kind of got a little bit more because Czechoslovakia kind of just couldn't happen because Bohemia existed. So they kind of just went on a little conquest to try and claim a little bit of their friend back, and that went pretty well. As you can see, they own a little bit of Czechia. Anyways, from here, we head down to Yugoslavia, which I'm going to save for another episode because a lot's going to be happening down here. I already guarantee that. But from here, let's start the first event of this episode instead of yapping. Because we head over to Russia. Russia is, in this timeline, not doing so well. In our timeline, Russia is the second strongest country in the world, though what they're doing in Ukraine isn't really supporting that. But let's get a little backstory on Russia. Russia used to control a lot more in this timeline. And it's been 5 years since this timeline formed, and they controlled a lot. So much so that they even won a small war against Sweden, because Sweden used to control a lot of the eastern part of Finland, but they gained that. And the old outline of Russia used to look a lot different. So let's really quickly create that. Okay, I got a little bit lazy with the border in the east, but as you can see, this timeline of Russia controlled a lot of land that the Soviet Union did. They also claimed a lot of Georgia, they claimed a lot of Poland. They didn't claim Kaliningrad, and I got this wrong. They didn't claim this, but they won that in a war. But they also won all of Finland in a war, so I guess it should look like that. But who knows? Either way, I'm going to erase that now, because now we're going to see what really happened since these 5 years, because a lot has happened. The main thing that happened, however, was Poland winning a war against Russia and setting up two kind of observer states in both Belarus and Ukraine. These two countries are pretty obedient to Poland. I wonder if I put it on the alliances map. I think I did. No, I didn't. Never mind. We're going to ignore that for now. But these three countries want their revenge against Russia. And, yeah, Russia, I mean, there's not much to get revenge against. So, yeah, we're going to see a war happening here. I don't know what I was trying to say, but it's definitely not the right word. Anyways, let's start this scenario up officially. Ukrainian forces begin to push right across the border, and they will go ahead and begin to invade into actual Russian provinces, because a lot of this is based on province borders, but a lot of it is also based on river borders, as we can see over here with this border with Belarus. Other ones are weird, and I don't want to talk about it. So, yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and enable cities, because that's the main thing going on here. Did I not? I know I hit the wrong layer. I hit rivers again. But here we go. Here are the cities. And as we can see, we have a lot of immediate targets. More specifically for Belarus, they're going to launch a huge assault on the first day, immediately taking this major city that I can't remember which one it is because of these borders. Perfect. Anyways, Poland is kind of just rolling right now. They're just having so much fun bullying Russia after Russia did everything they did to them. Next step, they're probably going to go after Germany. But, yeah, Russia is not doing too hot here. And this is going to cause them to kind of fall apart. And multiple different groups will begin to break away. Starting off in the south here, we're going to see a gray group break away in the kind of Azov kind of region. They'll quickly take Rostov-on-Don, and they'll meet up with the border of the Donbass Republic, which we'll talk about more probably after this war or in another episode. But this country is pretty strong, because this region was probably planning to break away next, seeing that Chechnya and Dagestan already broke away. Same for Abkhazia, actually, because that used to be Russian. And yeah, we're going to see them pushing pretty far in. But from here, we're also going to see another country getting involved with this conflict, and that's Georgia. Why? Because Russia still claims South Ossetia, so they want to absolutely destroy any claims that Russia could have over this land by invading Russia. And they're going to do a lot of work, especially since they're invading right into a mountain, but they're going to occupy all that land there. From here, things begin to get so much worse for Russia, as if they weren't already horrible. We're going to see yet another rebellion forming over in the Volga region, and they're very quickly going to start a massive revolt, moving up the river area over here and taking yet another major city, which I'm pretty sure that's Volgograd, even though it started over here, Volga, you know. And this group is an interesting group because they're communist, and a certain someone had something to do with this. This is the Soviet Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan in this timeline never left the Soviet Union, and so they kind of just are the Soviet Union. They don't go by that name anymore, but they essentially are the successor state to it, and they kind of sponsored this little guy over here so that they can gain a little more influence in core Russia, because Russia kind of collapsed, as you can see, with all these new reality countries forming, especially since the Soviet Union appeared in Kazakhstan, and yeah. So yeah, we're gonna see a very quick fall in southern Russia here as Georgian forces will go ahead and meet up with Grey Team forces in the south. As well as that, we're gonna see Volgan forces pushing down and meeting up with Georgian forces as well. At this point, they're gonna get cut off from any further expansion, and at this point, Russia is just they have nothing to like win anymore. I don't see any point for them to keep fighting. However, they will. Heading on down to the Ukrainian front, we're going to go ahead and see Russia losing a lot more land in the Kursk region. Eventually, they're going to lose this major city here. Moving up to the Belarusian front, we're going to see that Belarus is continuing to gain land. This is not at all good for Russia. They are like on their last legs, and eventually the government of Russia will collapse. Poland will basically take this as we won, and they're basically going to back up, but at the same time, they're also going to kind of take a little more of this land. So yeah, have fun, Russia. This is like your new life now. You're not going to be a country probably. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and drop a peace treaty for this scenario so we can go ahead and move on with the video. Okay, and this is the peace treaty we're going to be looking at for this war, starting off one by one. Starting off on the disputed layer, I know you can't see it, but South Ossetia is no longer claimed by Russia, and on the same like train with Georgia here, we're going to see them annexing all of the northern Ossetian area. Moving right on up, we're going to see that both Volga and the Azov state have gained full independence, and they've also been really heavily expanded on due to some threats that this guy over here may have made to the main Russian government to give them extra land, otherwise they would continue the war against them. So yeah, I'm so sorry, Russia. This is like the first time I've ever sympathized with Russia. But remember, this is also not Russia, so yeah. Anyways, moving on to the border with Belarus, we're going to go ahead and see them annexing this land here. This one mostly followed river border over here. They did finish off annexing this province, though, so I'm not going to claim it entirely river change, but yeah. Anyways, lastly, with Ukraine, they're going to go ahead and annex all this land here, hence finishing off this war officially. As for the rest of Russia, they are not doing good, and we can go ahead and disable disputed. We'll worry about that another time. But Russia is now a landlocked country. Is that a sentence I ever expected to say? No. But yeah, I'm so sorry, Russia. And at this point, the remainder of Russia will rename itself to Muscovy, something along that line. It would definitely be based on Moscow to separate itself from Russia, because this isn't Russia anymore. I mean, it is, but it also isn't. So take that as you will. Anyways, from here, we're going to go ahead and head on away from Europe and head on down to South America, because we're going to see yet another war happening over in this region. We head on over to Venezuela, which, as a country in this timeline, it literally just formed. Why? Because when this timeline started, Gran Colombia, it existed. It was pretty fine. It had all of Ecuador, it had all of Venezuela, it had a little more of Amazonas in Brazil here. It was a grander Colombia than Gran Colombia. They also had a little bit more in Costa Rica, but yeah, we're heading over to Venezuela for this event, though, because Venezuela wants their revenge for being a part of Gran Colombia. And so, 5 years after their initial independence war, they're going to go ahead and launch an invasion into Colombia. I know it's a little hard to see with this color, but just bear with it. It's not my fault I chose such bright colors. Well, I mean, I guess it is. Anyways, from here, we're going to see the Venezuelans continuing in. In Colombia, they are probably one of the worst examples of a country modernizing in this timeline. They've lagged behind seriously, and eventually we're going to see Venezuela taking hold over this entire area here. And from here, they're basically going to force a treaty on Colombia, and after Colombia kind of doesn't agree, they're going to continue over this way. Then they're going to invade down here a little bit, And then, okay, fine, Colombia's going to agree to a peace treaty because they don't want to lose more than they already have. So let's go ahead and look at this peace treaty really quickly. Taking a look at this map now, we can see that Venezuela forced a lot of land out of Colombia. Colombia did get a little bit of the area here back, but other than that, they're still losing by a lot. And Venezuela will annex all this land here. And yeah, poor Colombia. I'm sorry, but that had to happen. From here, Colombia is probably going to go into a full rebuilding stage instead of trying to go on like missions in Costa Rica to try and claim that back, which they've been doing. You'll see a little bit more of that later, though. Not in this episode. Some other time. But anyways, we can now move on to our next event, which is over here in Asia, more specifically Central Asia, because Turkmenistan as a country is broken. They were forcefully divided into two by an alliance to the south and around them, because this is the thing. The Trapezoid Alliance is pretty scary, and they all ganged up on Turkmenistan. Why? So they could link up Kazakhstan and Tatarstan to Persia and Balochistan. That sounded like a whole bunch of what we were, but you'll understand some other time. But basically, Turkmenistan lost the war to the Trapezoid Alliance because they wanted to link up their countries by land, and Turkmenistan is now kind of just facing the consequences for it. And that will be put into a great test because we head over to our good old pal Afghanistan here, which is a timeline where a certain group that controls them now kind of saw a lot of success in invading into some of their neighbors. So they're going to take a huge amount of time considering what their next move is. And eventually they will decide that they do want to control Turkmenistan. Basically, they'll send an offer out to Turkmenistan, basically saying, give us your eastern two provinces or we're annexing all of you. And Turkmenistan, who doesn't want to fight a war and doesn't want to lose their entire country because they know they will lose, will basically decide to give up half their country. So I guess let's just look at how this ends up looking like. Anyways, I've drawn in the border at this point, and this is all the land that Afghanistan will be annexing. Turkmenistan is not doing too fine, and at this point, the Trapezoid Alliance is kind of getting concerned for Turkmenistan because, should they be worried about this country collapsing and Afghanistan becoming a large power they have to worry about? Yeah, that's not really in their interests. So they're going to go ahead and invite Turkmenistan into their alliance. But Turkmenistan obviously is going to decline because they just fought a war with the Trapezoid Alliance. However, in due time, that might become something that Turkmenistan has to do because of a certain someone here. Anyways, let's leave this region so we can go ahead and initiate the final event for this video, which we're going to be coming over to China for. And I forget if no, I didn't put this on the map. It doesn't matter that much, though, because as you can see, China has been divided into many pieces. Most of the powerful countries on this map have, except for a select few, like Brazil. Mexico's doing pretty fine. India's decently fine. But China, they got split in half. And this has to do with stuff that happened in their own universes. It's not like anything's happened in the 5 years since this reality formed, but this southern Chinese state was initially just Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and a few settlements along Hainan and this peninsula here. Eventually, they managed to win against China in the Chinese Civil War that happened in their timeline, and they successfully united all of southern China. And eventually, northern China kind of just gave up on that, and South China hasn't really forgiven North China for existing. So we're going to go ahead and see southern China launching a conquest in order to unite China under their rule. And at this point in time, forces from all throughout the country will begin to push north, if I can get the right color. But yeah, China is in a really bad situation, more specifically North China, because South China has a massive army that they're going to use specifically to do this fast and get it over with. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's episode. I know leaving it on somewhat of a cliffhanger is not ideal, but if I want this series to do well, it's got to have some, like, stakes and plot. And that is exactly what I'm doing. When this series is done, I might publish these maps. So I'm going to save each and every episode probably as a different one. Maybe some episodes I'll skip because not much is going to be happening in some episodes. But from here, China is going to have to face a civil war, I guess. Or not a civil war, because they already had the civil war. They're going to have to face a conquest from the south. Now we're going to pick up right where we left off with China, as in the end of the last episode, we saw the South Chinese, which I explained this in the last episode, but the South Chinese were initially a country in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and a few settlements over near Hainan, and they basically took over all of this southern region of China before this universe kind of came into fruition. So it's kind of been a conflict that's been brewing, but this world's only been a thing for 5 years, a little over now, maybe like 6 years after this universe formed. So there has definitely been some stuff happening between these two, which are from the same timeline, by the way. Some of the other countries nearby are from different timelines, but these two, they're from the same timeline. Now, we saw that the South began a conquest to reunite China under a democratic flag. And so, let's jump right on into this conflict. As seen in the last episode, South Chinese forces began invading on multiple different fronts. One of the fronts they have a lot of success with is the front all the way over in the west, because there isn't much out over here. If I go ahead and enable the major cities map, I guess I'm proven wrong, but there are more over here. But there are 4 cities over here, and the South Chinese will kind of just roll through these as if there's nothing here, like I was saying, but that area is where they see the most success. However, as the war continues to drag on, more and more of these fronts begin to slow down. The middle will slow down, and at the same time, we also see the front in the east slowing down. And then we see the reverse happening. Northern Chinese forces will begin to push back against the South Chinese, mostly in the east, but also in this middle area a little bit towards this major city here, because they want to defend that, because it's a pretty populated city, I believe. I might be mixing it up with one of these ones. I'm pretty sure it's the former capital Nanking that this one is, or it's this one. You know what, don't ask me about China knowledge, because quite frankly, I don't know. But yeah, continuing on with this, the South Chinese will continue to see success in the west, as China, well, North China more specifically, is not really concerned about this front right now. Like, they can bear to lose this land, but this land is much more valuable, and it's a lot easier to defend because there are a lot more troops over here, but you have all your population here. So they're basically throwing all their troops at cities, which are much harder to take than, say, open territory over here. So yeah, South China is having a lot of trouble in this region, whereas over here, they're not. And let's go ahead and look at a different conflict for now, and we move right on south to Southeast Asia and Indonesia, which in this timeline, they united most of Southeast Asia, but by the time this world formed, they had already begun their decline. And between the 5 years that happened and the formation of the universe here, they had a little more land here, but they lost it to this Philippine country, and they also had Brunei. The thing about Brunei, though, is Brunei should not be independent. Brunei was a independent country from our timeline that made it into this timeline. However, when this universe started, Brunei was immediately taken over, and it was treated like a small rebellion in Indonesia. But eventually, it kinda subtly came back, and a border was established. And the Indonesian government couldn't really do much about it. So now, they're kinda just sending their whole military force at it. And if you know anything about Brunei, it's that they're pretty darn small and invadable. So yeah. That's not where this conflict ends necessarily. Because although they gain full control over the country, it doesn't exactly fall. There's going to be a lot of guerrilla warfare here, and eventually we see the whole country doing the exact same thing it did before. And then they do something that the Indonesians could not have seen coming. They send an invading force out, and it does well. Like, really well. It pushes out really far. They take out this much territory. And Indonesia is, like, confused. Like, how on earth is this small group doing this? Well, it turns out, after what had happened and Brunei came back, they kinda had a crisis where there may have been a super militaristic guy who kinda just killed half the population until they made him the leader. So, yeah, this guy's crazy, and he's just kinda throwing meat shields at the Indonesians to keep his country alive. Eventually, though, that falls apart. It's not gonna work forever because your population is very limited. And once again, yeah, bye. And this time, they won't return because he has no people left, and he kind of got taken prisoner by the Indonesians. But this will kind of be painted in the military leader's kind of like picture frame. Like, it's completely filled. Exactly what he wanted to happen in the scenario of him losing happened. Now, Indonesia is viewed as a country who just commit multiple different genocides over in this area, or specifically over here in this area, in Brunei itself, and over by this major city. And, while that necessarily doesn't bring Brunei back, it's gonna start something even worse. A massive rebellion over here in this part of Malaysia. That is not good. Very quickly, it will take over the occupation in Brunei, and it will send a whole bunch of crazy demands to the Indonesian government that they don't like. But seeing that the entire global community is now looking at them like they just killed a whole bunch of people who weren't using a whole bunch of horde techniques against them, Indonesia's kind of in a really bad situation that they're just gonna have to give up because there's literally nothing they could do that wouldn't make this comeback stronger. So for now, they're just gonna have to let it go. So let's go ahead and look at how they sort of deal with this situation. Now looking at this peace treaty, we can see that Brunei no longer exists. However, in the northern part of Borneo, a much larger rebellious state exists, also controlled by a really crazy military guy. Not from Brunei though, it's from this major city which they made capital. This guy was from Brunei, but he kind of blended in, so he like pretended he was a part of this group, and then when he became leader, he kind of just gave that whole thing up, and then just turned it into basically the exact same thing that Brunei was. I'm giving Brunei crazy lore, and that doesn't make any sense, but there you go, that's Brunei lore. Anyways, I feel like that's enough talking about this region. Let's go ahead and talk about a completely different region. Now moving over to the Horn of Africa with two particular countries, Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea in this timeline has suffered a massive loss in this region. I'm blanking on what it's called right now. It starts with an A, but they lost that because Ethiopia beat them in a war, and now they want to get revenge for the Tigray war that happened in this province here. And so basically, they're just gonna kind of launch a huge invasion that they probably aren't capable of themselves, and they're gonna send their forces into this one province, claiming it. Now, there's not much different between the Eritrea and Ethiopia's in this timeline, other than Ethiopia absolutely obliterated Somalia. But Eritrea's basically the same, except they lost this. Ethiopia's basically the same, but they got this. No different kind of government styles, and the Tigray conflict here is pretty similar to how it is in real life. Although I don't know much about that conflict in particular, I do know that Eritrea is not winning this conflict. And so, not even 2 weeks after the invasion begins, they're going to lose their entire front line. It's not even close. Ethiopia absolutely obliterates the Eritrean forces in this region. and then they pull an Uno reverse and kind of take half of Eritrea. So, like, maybe you shouldn't have done that, pal. And then they get coastline. That's rare. I mean, they did it already on this timeline, but, like, that's rare still. And then finally, we see the Eritrean government sitting down for a peace deal because they don't want to be wiped off the map. So, I know that event was quick, but let's see a peace treaty for it anyway. Alright, now that's peace treaty. Now looking at this peace treaty, yeah, as you can tell, the border gore is horrible, but Ethiopia literally took all of Eritrea's coast, and they turned them into a triangle. I'm sorry, Eritrea. I'm so sorry. I'm pretty sure YouTube's banned in that country, so I can't really apologize to anyone from there, because the chances of me, like, being able to tell that on, like, the statistics of this video are impossible. So, if anyone's still watching somehow, then I'm sorry, but, like, yeah, Eritrea, your country's absolutely cooked in this timeline. But they're still gonna exist. I mean, Ethiopia left them, so, I mean, it's not the worst it could be, but, definitely, yeah, you want to look into, probably not being that small in the future, so maybe they'll do something in a future episode. That might be them getting annexed by another country, but they might want to do something. Anyways, moving on to the next topic in this video, we're gonna head down over to South America. Why? Because Argentina over here is not doing so well. I'm gonna do a lot of lore here, so it's gonna be a lot. You might want to like look ahead in the video if you don't care much about the lore, but yeah, we're gonna be here for a bit because we're talking about not just Argentina, but the entirety of South America, at least most of it. Because we already talked about this region up here. Now we're talking about, like, all of the rest of this down here, and plus a little bit of Brazil. So, yeah, let's talk about this. In this timeline, right before the universe was created, there used to be a massive federation in South America. It consisted of all of these countries here, including Bolivia, Chile, all these guys, and eventually this thing broke apart. However, the main problem with it is that most of these countries kind of had disputes within this thing because of a lot of the different provinces wanted to go with different countries that they were a part of than they had. Sorry, let me rephrase that. But a lot of these provinces wanted to go with different countries than that of what they were a part of when this union formed. For example, provinces over here were a part of Argentina, but they joined Chile, and parts of Uruguay over here went ahead and joined Argentina. So that's kind of like the main thing here. But also, it has it has a few things to do with Paraguay and Brazil. Mostly Paraguay, though. Paraguay, in this timeline, is a kind of rogue state, and most countries in South America don't like them. We'll get to that more in a second, but they kind of took over a lot of Argentinian provinces, and they also kind of did a lot of damage to the Bolivian guys here. Though Bolivia did come out with a little more land than they do in our timeline, but still they gained some land from Bolivia, more particularly this large province here. Bolivia had that, but now they don't. But yeah, Paraguay is kind of like a rogue state that kind of led to this whole thing falling. Initially, when this timeline was kind of forming, it's kind of like a weird program was selecting all the countries in this union as that union to come into this world. I'm not saying there's like a program that started this. I'm just trying to create unique lore. And they selected two countries from this timeline. The South American Federation that collapsed right before the thing formed, and also Paraguay. So half of this continent is from one timeline. But also Brazil, because in the 5 years since this formed, they also had a little bit of a thing to do with you. Because Paraguay may or may not have been funded by the Brazilians to maybe do a little bit of something with this giant Argentine country who's trying to bring back the Union. While they're not successful with it, many countries are now reconsidering this idea of a union. More specifically, Uruguay and Patagonia are rethinking their choices and are kind of wanting it back. Like, they want to rejoin and form a new South American federation. However, Brazil's not having any of that, and so they're going to fund Paraguay into once again invading into Argentina in order to discourage this union. Basically, if you form this union again, you're going to get absolutely obliterated by us again. With promises of land and promises of much economic aid, Paraguay will be much up to the task. And with their unethical fighting style that doesn't reflect anything that's happened in real life, they're very quickly going to move south into Argentine territory, taking a major city within a matter of days. Multiple weeks later, they're eventually going to begin spearheading southwards, not with much goal in mind, just to kind of cause a whole bunch of chaos, but very quickly, the Argentinian public grows angry at the government for their handling of the war, even though it's been only a few weeks, but the public is absolutely outraged, and multiple rebellions will begin to happen. More specifically, we see a rebellion happening over here in the lands that chose to join with Argentina instead of joining Uruguay, and also some of the lands all the way down here in the south who chose to stay with Argentina instead of joining up with Patagonia. And there's also one more region, a region up here, one that Paraguay is particularly interested in. Why? Because it borders Bolivia. And in this timeline, Bolivia kind of whooped Paraguay in that war. Even though it didn't end up going in Bolivia's favor, Paraguay still wants revenge for that. So instead of kind of benefiting from these rebellions, they're going to shift their focus over to this one in order to wipe it out, so they can gain this land hopefully when the war ends, so they can have an up against Bolivia if a war ever breaks out between them two. And yeah, half of this thing gets wiped out immediately. But then Brazil kind of just says, yo, if you continue to invade the rebellions that are helping us, then we're going to invade you. And I know you don't want that. We don't want that. But I know you don't want it more, so yeah, that's like how we're gonna go about this here. And so Paraguay will basically say, okay, as long as we're able to keep the lands we already have over here. Brazil is fine with that, but they're also still not. So eventually, they will shift their focus back down south, but Paraguay is already kind of done with this war, and they're kind of just eventually gonna stop. And then the Argentine government will push them back. And it's not by a little, it's by a lot. You can tell that the Paraguayan morale has definitely gone down, because they don't care for this war much anymore. Brazil's like, that's it, we're entering this war. And because they know Argentina will eventually wipe out these rebellions, they're gonna kind of just invade this rebellion and say, yo, we're helping, trust, we're gonna give it back to you after the end of the war. They don't say that, but they kind of just invade it anyway. And then they begin to push out, and at a certain point, it gets bad enough to where they're threatening their capital, where they basically say, yo, just give this war up, let Paraguay win, let us win, and we'll let you out of this alive. And Argentina, who's already been crippled enough, will agree to these terms. There's one more thing in there. You're not allowed to bring back the South American Union in any shape, way, or form. Meaning there can't be a large union in South America in this region guided by these regional countries ever again. One thing that is discreetly mentioned is that it's by a country within this region. Meaning, they're not letting Argentina do it, they're not letting Paraguay do it, they're not letting Bolivia, Chile, any of these guys do it. But it's not saying that Brazil can't. I don't know if they think they can, like, create a union down here because they're invading it. But, who knows? Maybe that's showing something in the future, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just making a rant because I don't know what's going to happen here yet, because I've only written up to episode 4. But, who knows? Anyways, that's enough yapping. Let's go ahead and see a peace treaty. Alright, and now this is the peace treaty that we're looking at for this war. And as you can see, Argentina's not liking it. First off, I'm going to talk about this area down here. Argentina made a special deal with them that allowed them to like kind of convince them to stay in the Union, and so yeah, they're not going to be leaving the Union, at least for now. Or is Argentina a Union? I don't know. Well, not really, but like we call the United States a Union. It's kind of weird calling other countries that, now that I think about it. Anyways, moving on with the peace treaty, we head on over to Brazil, who will annex the rest of Uruguay that Uruguay doesn't control, which is about half their former country. So yeah, Brazil now will go ahead and look like this, much larger, and, well, not much larger because they're already really large, that didn't really change much, but they're larger. Who really got legal land though is Paraguay, who maybe honestly doubled in size. I can't really tell. Of course, with map distortions, it's also a little weirder to tell. But Paraguay definitely got a lot of land from this. And then there's this guy. I forget this Argentinian province's name, but it's the one all the way in this north area that looks really funky. The rebels took control of this, and they now want to get rid of Paraguay because they attacked them. So, yeah, now you have a rival, Paraguay. And guess what? They're going to use the same tactics as you. Foreshadowing. But that's not really foreshadowing, that's just me telling you what's going to happen in the future. Anyways, I think that is enough for this event, as we're going to head over right back down to China, or right back up to China, for the last update for this in this episode, at least. We're going to finish it in the next episode, I promise. It's just going to take a while to finish this, because this conflict is pretty big. And yeah, the South Chinese, they're gonna begin to cook China again in the central area. They are gonna push through the front line on the western area of this major city that China was defending so, like, desperately. And then they also see a lot of success in pushing into this major city. And then it kind of becomes worse as they also capture this major city, which is really concerning for China, because there are just a lot of major cities in this area now, and it looks like South China has a direct ticket into this region. However, on the opposite side of things, Northern China is successfully able to wipe out the entirety of the front lines over here. However, they're not going to continue invading yet, because they don't have the military might to do it right now. Plus, they want to shift their focus over to the western and central regions for now. Anyways, heading over to the last event in this episode, we head over to Central Europe as we look to Hungary and the disputed layer. I talked about this in the last episode, I believe, but Hungary has a lot of disputes with their neighbors. Austria, Slovakia, Eastern Yugoslavia, and Romania, and also Poland to an extent, but Poland doesn't care that much. And yeah, all these countries have kind of been waiting for an opportunity to absolutely obliterate Hungary. Now the time has come, because Romania is going to go ahead and be the first to send their forces over the border. And now at this point, Romanian forces will enter into Hungary and will begin to deal a lot of damage. Not gonna sit idly by, we also see Slovakia entering this war. They've gone a little more militaristic than in real life, and they're gonna take a major city pretty quickly. But outside of that, their forces are pretty slow in comparison to the rest of the countries that will be joining this war. Moving on, we head on to Eastern Yugoslavia, or which I'm gonna call Serbia because it's so much easier. It's not Serbia, but it's easier to say Serbia. They're gonna very quickly push into southern Hungary. Austria is gonna wait because they don't want to be an aggressor in this war unless it's like, oh, free land. And so basically, it's just gonna be these three versus Hungary for now. Is what I would have said if it was those three versus Hungary. Because we're also going to see a Balkan war happening. Because obviously you can't have Serbia without Croatia fighting. Or Western Yugoslavia, sorry, slipped out. This is Western Yugoslavia, not Croatia. Weird timelines, I know. But yeah, these two are gonna get into a conflict with each other. So it's now Hungary and West Yugoslavia versus Eastern Yugoslavia. Just Eastern Yugoslavia is fighting both, but Romania and Slovakia are also at war with Hungary. So you're in a 2-on-1 technically, but then the rest is a 3-on-1 for Hungary, really. I'm not going to try and explain it because it's weird. Multiple countries declared war on Hungary because, yeah, they have a lot of disputes with each and every one of their neighbors. More specifically, all their neighbors except for Slovenia and the Western Yugoslav country. And, yeah, they're going to be taking a beating for that. So, yeah, let's start over here with Romania, because Romania is definitely the strongest country involved in this conflict, and they're going to use that to their advantage, as they're basically going to, like, solo out Hungarians in this area, and they're going to do some bad things, because, well, they can, and Hungary's kind of, like, nobody likes them right now, so it's kind of a little more acceptable, but what they're doing is not at all acceptable, so yeah, just think kind of things that were happening over here in the last episode. Whoa, it zoomed in really far. But yeah, the type of things that were happening in Borneo in the last episode. Kind of similar thing happening over here, but not exactly the same. But Romania is definitely going to take advantage of the situation. But an interesting front line over here is the front line between the two Yugoslav countries. These guys, I'm still not going to talk about their history quite yet. That's for probably the next episode. But these two, they were once united. That's all we really need to talk about for now. But yeah, they're both Yugoslav states. This isn't Croatia. They use the Croatian flag, but it's not Croatia. This is not Serbia. It's East Yugoslavia, but they use the Yugoslav flag. So I guess they are Yugoslavia. It's weird, but it's also strange. Like, why would Croatia keep the Yugoslavia name? We'll find out more about that later, but for now, let's update the front line, because the eastern or western half, which I'm honestly just going to call Croatia. I know I literally just said it's not Croatia, but I'm going to call it that because it's easier to say than Western Yugoslav Republic. Yeah. I think everyone agrees with me on that one. But they are going to go ahead and wipe out the entirety of Yugoslavia's coastline. And from here, yeah, they're not going to take that too lightly, as they have the advantage in, like, inland territory. And they're going to go ahead and push their forces over westward, now prioritizing the Croatian country over their front in Hungary, which is going to give the Hungarians a little bit of open space to push them back out of their country. From here, they will try to fight back the Slovakians, but the Slovakians are kind of, like, already established in this region, and so they're kind of just gonna ignore them for now, because there's a much bigger threat over to the east. And though they have initial successes over here, eventually they're going to lose all this area up here. So was it really worth it? Probably not. And it's at this point in time that Austria will officially get involved in the war. Initially, they didn't want to join because they didn't want to, like, have many casualties, but now they see it as the opportunity to get their land back. As you can see, they dispute all this land here. They already have all that occupied, so they're kind of just going to sit back here and hold on to this land here. And at this point, the main Hungarian coalition is over, except Hungary and Romania are still fighting, and these two are still fighting. But outside of that, not much is happening. So let's kind of wrap this up, starting over here with Romania, as they're going to go ahead and take over a lot more land, seizing this major city that I cannot off the top of my head name. And yeah, that's going to basically do it for that front line. But over here, yeah, we're basically going to see these two meeting up and basically saying, yo, I get this back, you get all this back, we're chill, okay? Ooh, that is not what I wanted to do. I meant to click that tiny little thing there. But anyways, now we can go ahead and look at a peace treaty between all these countries who participated in the coalition. Okay, and this is the peace treaty that is drawn up for Hungary following the coalition, and as you can see, Hungary lost a lot of land. We're actually going to start over on the disputed land area, because there's still a few provinces that are disputed. First of all, this area, this province here, the Serbian Yugoslav area still claims, and you can see that Romania actually gained this one province here. Cannot remember it right now what it's called, but it's in Ukraine. Carpathian something, but Slovakia claims it, but Romania kind of just owns it. And yeah, there's a little bit of beef between these two now. And yeah, Hungary, talking about Hungary, they're not going to do well after this. Their government's going to fall apart, and we'll talk about them more some other time. But they lost land to Austria, Slovakia, and Romania. They did still retain this control against the Serbian state, but their time might be numbered because they still want this. Just until the peace treaty is no longer in effect, I guess, is till when you have. But yeah, now we get to go ahead and look at something we haven't done much with. That's the alliances map. And let's talk about each and every alliance individually now, because I feel like it's time. I believe it was the first episode, we did talk about the Trapezoid Alliance. It was very briefly, but we did talk about them nonetheless. We'll talk about them again here in a second, but I want to go over every single alliance before I get to that. So yeah, moving down over to Africa, we have the East African Alliance. And this alliance used to be bigger, but unfortunately, Rwanda got kind of power hungry and took a large bite out of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or I guess just the Republic of the Congo, because it's both of them. And then Tanzania left, or technically Tanganyika left because they had a split with Zanzibar. And yeah, we'll talk about this more in the like summary of like what happened before this. I don't know what that will be exactly yet. It's probably not going to be its own episode, but there's probably going to be like some sort of summary for everything that happened in the 5 years before episode 1, when this universe first formed. But basically, when this universe formed, this alliance was much larger. In fact, this country here was much larger on its own, and then it kind of split out because of this reality being weird. But yeah, we'll talk more about that some other time. But for now, let's head over to the Square Alliance in North America. This one is kind of like, these guys are hardly in an alliance with each other. Canada and the US, they kind of agreed to make an alliance with the Cascadian state because these three all wanted to keep peace in North America, though at the same time, they kind of all hate each other. More specifically, the US and Canada hate Cascadia, and these two in this timeline, they're not on the best terms. Of course, they both kind of had the same falling out, of course, with them losing a lot of land over here specifically, and also down here in the US, they lost a lot there. So these two are kind of ops right now, but not really. So that might like intrigue you on why they're in an alliance. We'll talk about that again in some sort of summary. Every single alliance formed before this the first episode, but after the universe formed. So yeah, it's a little weird to look at. We'll talk about that more again in another episode or something. Moving over to the Circle Alliance, this is where we see a little bit more of a like actual cause for the alliance. Mainly, these four are all in an alliance to prevent the continued expansion of the Holy Roman Empire, who is kind of a continental superpower in a way. They're the strongest country in all this area of Europe, other than the Swedish. That's their main rival. But yeah, the Germans, Holy Roman Empire, whatever you want to call it, this is technically a united Holy Roman Empire, so that's what I'm going to call them. They are technically the strongest in the mainland continent, other than Sweden. Now, moving on, we finally circle back to the Trapezoid Alliance. I almost said the wrong shape there. But they're going to be adding not one, but two new members. And the first new member will go ahead and be over here in the Volga Republic. I said in the very first episode that they were kind of supported with all their ideals by the Kazakhs, because remember, this is not Kazakhstan exactly. It's the Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan. So technically it's not Kazakhstan, but it really is Kazakhstan. It's just a really communist one. And they kind of exerted their influence into this Russian state when Russia collapsed. And as well as that, we're going to see Bashkortostan. I'm probably saying that wrong. They're also going to be joining this alliance. Tatarstan already joined it. Might as well join it as well. And yeah, at this point, technically, I think the Trapezoid Alliance is the strongest alliance, even beating out the squares and the circles, if that sounds crazy enough. Anyways, it's time for us to go ahead and wrap up the conflict in China, because this has been going on for a little too long now. So let's finish this up. And to start off, we need something to change here. And what is that change going to be? Well, we're going to see the North Vietnamese country joining this war, officially expanding it to multiple countries versus one. And that's not really good for South China, because they weren't intending on fighting the Northern Vietnamese right now, because, yeah, they are kind of really focused on their northern neighbor right now. But things can't get that much worse, right? Says me, but no, they can't, because Laos is also going to join this war. These two are the closest countries with China, or northern China at least, and they want to help their ally out. However, at this point, we're going to see southern Vietnam also getting involved with this conflict, because wherever northern Vietnam is involved, southern Vietnam is going to get involved. But this timeline, where southern Vietnam comes from, is a timeline where they won their equivalent of the Vietnam War and secured their separation from northern Vietnam. And in this timeline, they have kind of become like South Korea is to North Korea, except North Korea kind of did the opposite in their timeline. They took over South Korea. But this is basically the equivalent of South Korea if it was in Vietnam in this timeline. It's kind of like Vietnam and Korea's results switched, but that's just the handpicking of realities that happened. I don't know how I'm going to explain that in later episodes, but the main lore of this series will explain that around, like, maybe episode 15 or something. I don't even know if this series will go on that long. Who knows? But yeah, the main lore of this series is yet to come. And as for now, we're just seeing all the wars happening, all this stuff unfolding as this reality did. And so, with all that yapping out of the way, the Southern Vietnamese, will immediately dart straight up into Northern Vietnam and deal a lot of damage early on. However, they were not expecting Laos to also get involved fighting the Southern Vietnamese, so they see a little bit of flaws in their front line here, though it doesn't affect them that much, because at the same time they can also just do this, which they will do. And yeah, this inevitably helps out the South Chinese kick these guys out. However, at this point, the damage has been done, and the Northern Chinese will begin to push back against the Southern Chinese. But this war is not completely over for the Southern Chinese yet, because they're going to get one more ally. And that ally is the Manchurian country. Manchurian country fears for their existence, not only because China's here, but also because Korea's here, and they don't want to get gobbled up by them. So they're going to join this conflict now in order to hopefully survive, because if they don't join this conflict, they're probably going to get wiped out by the Chinese. And so they will send their entire army over in immediately, quickly deal damage. They will reach the capital of China, though the amount of damage to the capital they can do is not very much. Their whole military is probably as big as the population of, or not the population, the entire size of a Chinese unit fighting down here. So yeah, good luck. Anyways, this will divert enough attention to where the Southern Chinese will once again be able to move their front line out, and they will take this key Chinese city that they were protecting so desperately in the last episode. And yeah, at this point, South China will see a whole bunch of points in their front line where they can just begin to push through, and the defensive forces in this area will be no match, as South China will begin to obliterate the North Chinese over in the east. And over on the west, it's even worse, because this whole area will basically just fall over to them. They're just going to push up a little, and it's theirs, basically. And yeah, you're not doing really good, China, right now. It's not looking too great. And it's going to get even worse, because we head over to this area over here that is a little off to the side, because we're going to see a massive rebellion happening over here to the people who are kind of not really involved in this conflict. They kind of want to escape this whole mess. It's a couple of provinces, actually two, or maybe just this one. That border would be ugly. I'm kind of deciding how I want this peace treaty to play out in the end, and I don't really know what I want to do with this thing. I know I wanted it to exist, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, so we'll see. Anyways, heading back down to the front in Southeast Asia, the Southern Vietnamese will kick out the Laotians from their country, and after that, they will officially cut off this area of Laos. At this point, Laos will basically just be like, we're out of this conflict, we're leaving. Good luck, China and Northern Vietnam. And at this point, Northern Vietnam will be pushed back a little more, and at this point, they will officially surrender, allowing for Southern Vietnamese to probably gain a lot of land out of this conflict. And now, the real conflict here. Moving back up north, we're going to see the Chinese pushing back the Manchurians entirely. They're not going to push into the country because they know that would probably cause problems for the rest of their military, specifically down south. But at this point, it's not like you can really do much because the South Chinese have basically convinced your population to revolt against you. You're carrying out a very unpopular war, and you're not trying to make peace or anything, and it's not really paying off that well. And apparently, the zoom tool isn't either because it zoomed me into the middle of China for no reason. But yeah, basically at this point, the Northern Chinese, they have nothing left to fight for. And eventually, that's going to lead to a massive rebellion happening over in the east, if I can get my thing right. But yeah, a huge rebellion will happen over here, and this rebellion will very quickly spread through the major cities of China. And at this point, the communist government is basically in shambles, and they will agree to meet for peace with the other Chinese states. So let's go ahead and look at a peace treaty for this conflict. Alright, and this is the peace treaty we're going to be looking at for this war. And as you can see, the South Chinese have expanded tremendously. The border used to be around this area here, and it moved up quite a bit. Moved like that much. That's quite a bit for one war. But as you can see, the border gore is real. As is it Qinghai or Qing something? Well, this state here is going to go ahead and gain its independence from China, and as well as that, after all this land is taken down here, we're going to see China splitting into two. The Democratic Republic of China, and then Communist China still exists, but it's not really that big of a country anymore. It's not as globally recognized. Like, not many people know it. Like, if you think of an average American, they know not too many countries. This country wouldn't be one of them. If so, they'd probably know about this China, if anything. Maybe this one, but that's kind of like my example for it. Now moving down to the south, though, we're going to see that southern Vietnam has gone ahead and taken over most of northern Vietnam. And, yeah, you're not doing too well, are you now? But anyways, that's not where the conflict, really, it's not really where this ends. Because after this, we're going to see an alliance forming between most of the victors of the war. And I got to make sure I don't repeat a shape. I think this one hasn't been used. Let me see. Diamond Alliance. Let's go. And, yeah, obviously I said the victors of the war will be joining this alliance. Southern China will be the first member. Then we see the Blue Chinese Democratic State over here joining. Then we see Manchuria joining. They didn't get any land, but they got new allies, which is probably going to help them against Korea over here. And we also see Qinghai joining, but unfortunately, they're not going to be able to get Southern Vietnam into their alliance. But they're also going to be able to get another member, and that is Xinjiang, because they are scared of the Trapezoid Alliance over here. So I guess really this war resulted in a new kind of group Chinese alliance that is in a way opposed to this alliance now because of Xinjiang joining the alliance. So that might have an unexpected outcome for you, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and look at something else. More specifically, we're moving down here to Mozambique. And more specifically, this reality of Mozambique is a very giving kind of country. They helped Eswatini and Malawi continue their existence by giving them a little bit of land. They, of course, had a price for that, but it's kind of coming back to them, and they're not doing too well economically, and it's just a really bad situation. And it's at this point that Great Zimbabwe will move their troops into Mozambique from the east, if I can be on the right layer, of course. This happens so much. I should probably not say anything like that so I can actually cut it out. But, yeah, this is not going to be very good for Mozambique, as these forces coming from Great Zimbabwe, they're going to deal a lot of damage and fast. They're going to push all this out of Mozambique. They're going to take a lot of land, and they're going to push up to here. They're basically going to say, yo, you know you're not going to win this. Just give us this land. We want coastline, and we know you want to live, so just accept the peace deal. And Mozambique will be forced to do exactly that, and we can now immediately look at a peace treaty for this conflict. And it's as simple as drawing one line, because all this land over here is what Zimbabwe will annex, and now Zimbabwe is probably the largest country in the region. Yeah, that's kind of scary. Zimbabwe of all countries. Ugh. Who knows? Anyways, we'll go ahead and go up north to this little small country over here. We're still in Africa, of course, and this next event is a little bit of an interesting one, because in this timeline that this little country is from, Beertawil, of course, this country was formed by a whole bunch of people who were tired of Egypt and Sudan disputing over this territory, that they decided to conquer this little triangle of land, and it ended up becoming a country. Although this Egypt is from a completely different timeline, where they controlled a lot of this land, including Beertawil. And Beertawil has used a whole bunch of guerrilla warfare tactics in order to not get annexed by Egypt. And this is where their streak ends, however, because Egypt's basically going to bomb this thing to smithereens. It's not a very good look, but it gets the job done. And Beertawil and its residents, who are pretty wholesome, a very welcoming country, they're going to be erased from the map. So, good job, Egypt. You probably lost the respect of half the audience that made it this far into the video. So, good job, you and your border gore, because nobody likes what's going on here. Nobody. Anyways, let's move on to the last event of this episode. This one is a pretty long recording already, 31 minutes. So let's see if we can not make this too long with this last event, which we're moving over to the HRE to do. And that's because they're going to be expanding. Which country is their prey today? Well, it's none other than this weird country here that I don't have a name for. This one's obviously inspired by Wixo country and it is Pros World, but I don't really have a name for it, so yeah, you're probably not that important. And, you know what, let me just erase that now. You're not making it far into this at all, so, yeah, bye. And it's only a matter of hours before the HRE can officially, obliterate it. They're gonna claim it pretty quickly. They claimed it when they came into this reality, and now they've officially exerted their pressure over it. And with this, we're actually done with this episode. So yeah, if you want to see more of this series, make sure you do subscribe. Like the video also helps a lot. It tells me that you like this type of content and you would like to see more. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video, and I'll see you all in the next one.